The wind that afternoon was a kind that wandered without purpose, cold, restless, brushing across the plains as if it, too, carried secrets from a frontier. Elias Ward, age 36, rode through it with a steady, tired gait of a man who no longer expected much from life or land. His horse, a mud-colored gelding with a scar down its flank, snorted against the chill. Elias tipped his hat lower, not from the weather, but from habit. One learned after losing more than a man ought to lose. Ahead lay Duster Creek, a modest settlement crouched against the horizon. Elias had planned only to buy flour, salt, and cartridges. Nothing else. Nothing that tied him to anyone. He preferred it that way. Then he heard it, a child's voice, thin and quivering. "Please don't take our food. We saved all day for this." Elias slowed his horse. Beside the rutted road stood a little girl no older than 7, bare feet blue from cold, clutching a dented tin pot as if it were something sacred. Her dress was threadbare, her hair unbraided and wind-scattered, her cheeks hollow but determined. Behind her stood a boy, maybe 10, shoulders squared as if trying to take the shape of a man long before his time. He held a rusted kettle lid, like a shield. A tiny toddler, no more than 18 months, sat in the dust beside them, sucking on 2 fingers and blinking up with big, tired eyes. Elias didn't speak at first. The girl stared at him with a mixture of fear and plea, something he knew too well. "Who's taking your food?" Elias finally asked, voice low, steady. "That man." The boy jerked his chin toward a figure darting away through the brush, a thin ranch hand clutching the pot that must have belonged to the moments before. The girl's eyes shone with desperate bravery. Elias didn't think. He reacted. He swung off his horse and moved with the quiet, practiced speed of a man who'd spent years surviving worse than thieves. His boots hit the ground. He ran. Branches snapped. The fleeing man looked back, panic flashing in his eyes. Elias gained on him. A lunge. A hand gripping cloth. The thief tumbled into the dirt. A short, sharp scuffle followed. Simple, efficient. Elias didn't need to throw more than 2 punches before the man spat blood, tossed the pot aside, and scrambled away like a coyote, denied its supper. Elias picked up the pot. The stew inside sloshed but hadn't spilled completely. When he returned, the little girl's breath hitched with relief. "You got it back." She hugged the pot to her chest, as if it were warm enough to thaw her hands. The boy leveled a cautious stare at Elias. "Why'd you help us?" Elias shrugged. "Didn't feel right. Someone taking what's yours." The girl nodded solemnly, as though she recognized truth in him. "I'm Clara. I'm 7. She pointed at the boy. "That's Micah. He's 10. And Jonah, he's 1. Mama says he's mighty strong for his size." Elias glanced at the baby, whose round eyes studied him without judgment. Something in that look tugged at an old wound inside Elias, one he kept buried deep under silence and grit. "Where are your folks?" Elias asked quietly. Micah's throat bobbed. Clara looked down. The baby fussed. Finally, the girl whispered, "Mama's sick, real sick. Papa's gone." Elias felt the wind shift, colder now. "Show me," he said. Micah led the way along a narrow path beaten down by desperate feet. Clara walked beside Elias, cradling the pot as if it contained more than stew. Hope, maybe. Jonah rode in Micah's arms, fussing when the cold wind blew too hard. Elias followed quietly, reading the land, the footprints, the way the children's shoulders hunched from long habit. These were young ones who knew fear better than childhood. Their shack came into view, a sagging structure of warped planks and patched holes. Smoke barely trailed from the crooked chimney, as if the fire inside didn't have strength to rise. Clara pushed the door with her foot and slipped into the dim interior. "Mama, we're back, and someone helped us." No answer. Elias ducked through the doorway. The room smelled of sickness, stale sweat, damp cloth, cooling ashes. On a thin mattress in the corner lay a woman in her early 30s, face flushed with fever, hair plastered to her forehead. Her breath rattled faintly, each inhale like a weary plea. She tried to sit when she saw Elias, but her body betrayed her, trembling before collapsing back. Clara rushed to her side. "Mama, it's okay. He got our food back. The woman forced a faint smile. Clara, Micah, thank the Lord you're safe. She looked at Elias, then, eyes clouded but kind. Sir, I'm sorry. We've nothing to pay for kindness. Elias knelt beside her. You're sick. How long? Micah answered, voice rough. 2 weeks. Fever keeps getting worse. She can't work no more. We try to help, but... He swallowed hard and looked away. Clara placed a spoonful of stew on her mother's lips. Rose coughed but swallowed. Jonah crawled onto the mattress and curled against her, small fingers clutching her sleeve. Elias studied Rose's skin, too hot, too red. He'd seen fever like this before. She needs medicine, he said. Proper care. There ain't no money, Micah muttered. Elias rose slowly, jaw tightening. Stay with her. I'll be back. He stepped outside and breathed air free of sickness, though heavy with thought. He mounted his horse and rode toward town. The memory of those children burned into his mind. Something about Clara's trembling voice, please don't take our food, still echoed. Duster Creek wasn't large, but it throbbed with noise. A saloon piano jangling, men laughing too loud, boots striking boardwalks. Elias pushed through swinging doors into the saloon. Smoke hung thick, mixing with sweat and rough whiskey. Heads turned as he entered. Conversations dipped. A man at the bar squinted. Well, look who crawled back to daylight. Elias Ward, the ghost with a heartbeat. Another snorted. Surprised his ranch ain't swallowed him whole by now. Elias ignored them. He approached the barkeep. Need fever powder. Penicillin tincture, too. The barkeep raised a brow. That ain't cheap. Didn't ask for cheap. Coins clinked on wood. A drunk cowboy slid off his stool and staggered toward Elias. Hey now, I remember you. He poked Elias's chest. You're the one couldn't save his own family when that fire took him. Silence clamped the room. The drunk grinned stupidly. Right until Elias seized him by the shirt and slammed him onto the table with a single, clean motion. Glass shattered. The saloon went still. Elias didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply released the man and walked out with the medicine in hand, leaving whispers behind him like dust trails. Outside, he paused, breath trembling, not from rage, but from the memory the drunk had kicked open. His mind flashed to flames licking the night sky, a woman screaming his name, the helpless weight of failure. He shut his eyes hard, forced the image away. He had no right to think of the past now. Clara's voice washed over him again. Please don't take our food. He mounted his horse and pushed it hard back toward the shack. But as he neared, something felt wrong, too still, too quiet. A horse snorted. Male voices murmured. Then came a harsh laugh. Elias slid off his horse, drew his revolver, and crept toward the shack's thin wall. Someone inside said, That's a debt, woman. Your man owed us. Now you pay. Elias stepped forward. Elias stepped through the doorway without hesitation, revolver raised. His shadow sliced across the dirt floor, long and sharp. 3 men stood inside, dust-coated, mean-eyed, their clothes marked by the kind of work done at a gun's end. Rose lay on the mattress, shielding Jonah with her arm. Clara pressed against her mother's side, eyes wide with terror. Micah held a broken chair leg like a weapon, trembling but refusing to back down. One bandit turned toward Elias. He had a scar splitting his upper lip and a pistol pointed directly at Rose. Now who in hell are you? Someone you don't want to push, Elias said. The man smirked. We ain't here for sport. Her husband took something from us. Debt stands. She pays. She's sick, Elias answered. You see that. Not my concern. Payment's due. Elias's jaw tightened. Put the gun down. The scar-lipped bandit laughed. I don't take orders from. The moment his finger twitched, Elias fired. The bullet struck the man's shoulder, spinning him into the wall. Clara screamed. Micah grabbed her, pulling her toward the corner. The other 2 bandits lunged in panic, drawing their weapons. Elias dropped to one knee, firing again, clean, practice shots that forced them back to the door and into the open yard. Dust exploded under boot steps. Elias pursued them outside, using the corner of the shack for cover as bullets tore splinters from the rotted planks. The bandits cursed and retreated toward their horses. "We'll be back," one shouted. "All of you are dead when we return." Their hooves thundered off into the plains, leaving silence heavy enough to choke. Elias stood still for a long moment, chest heaving, revolver smoking faintly in his hand. The shack behind him creaked under the fading echoes of violence. Inside, Rose had pushed herself upright, though her strength was barely more than breath. "You shouldn't have risked yourself." Elias holstered his gun. "Didn't have a choice." "You could have walked away," she murmured, voice fraying. Clara shook her head fiercely. "No, he's good, Mama. He helped us." Elias knelt beside the mattress. Rose's skin burned like fire. The fever had worsened in the time he'd been gone. He placed the medicine beside her, but knew it wouldn't act fast enough. "You need rest," he said. "I'll stay till morning. Make sure those men don't return." Micah stared at him with something between suspicion and hope. "You really staying?" "For tonight." Clara climbed closer to Elias, as if he were already some kind of shield. Jonah reached out his tiny hand, brushing Elias's coat sleeve. The touch hit deeper than any bullet ever had. Rose watched Elias with tired, knowing eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias nodded once, as if the words were too heavy to receive. He moved to the corner, stoked the weak fire, added wood from the pile outside. Flames grew, warm enough to paint soft light on Clara's small face as she drifted toward sleep beside her mother. Micah sat awake longer, leaning against the wall, keeping guard even though his eyelids drooped. Outside, the wind shifted again, cold and sharp, carrying the memory of the men who would surely return. Elias sat with his back to the door, revolver rested across his knee, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the threshold. He told himself it was just for the night, just until danger passed. But inside him, something had already begun to move, a stirring he hadn't felt since before the fire stole everything he lived for, a quiet, aching sense that he was needed, that he mattered again. Clara murmured in her sleep, "Thank you, even if you leave tomorrow." Elias looked at her small, fragile form curled beside her mother. He didn't answer, but he knew damn well he wasn't leaving. The first light of dawn broke over Duster Creek, pale and tentative, brushing the edges of the shack with a ghostly glow. Elias Ward, 36, sat on a low crate outside, his coat stiff with dust from the previous night's skirmish. He watched the horizon, restless, revolver resting across his knee. The wind whispered through the tall prairie grass, carrying faint scent of smoke and with ash from the long-dead fire pits around the settlement. Inside the shack, Rose stirred weakly. Her fever had not broken, and her body shivered beneath the thin blanket she clutched. Clara, 7, knelt at her mother's side, brushing damp hair from her pale face. Jonah, 1, squirmed in her lap, whimpering softly, his tiny fingers clutching the frayed edge of his mother's gown. Micah, 10, stood near the doorway, posture stiff, eyes scanning the surrounding plain. He had slept little, and the dark circles beneath his eyes made him look older than his years. But the determination in his jaw betrayed his resolve. Rose's voice, when it came, was a thin rasp. "Elias, you stay for us." She tried to push herself up, but her body refused. Elias rose quickly and moved beside her, gently steadying her. His eyes, tired and haunted, softened as he took in her weakness. "You need to rest," he said. "No strength in you to fight off the fever alone." Clara's voice trembled. "Mama's been sick for days. We tried, but we couldn't do enough." Elias nodded. "I'll find help." Rose tried to speak, but only a raspy cough escaped. She pressed a hand to her chest, shivering despite the meager warmth of the fire. Before he could leave, a distant clatter rose from the edge of the property. Elias's instinct snapped to attention. He moved to the door, peering through the cracks of the wood. 3 figures emerged from the morning mist, horses stirring dust, rifles slung across their shoulders. The same bandits from the night before. "They're back," Micah whispered, gripping the doorframe. Clara clutched her mother, fear flaring in her wide eyes. Jonah squealed, startled by the movement. Elias drew his revolver, the metal cold and familiar in his hand. "Stay behind me," he instructed, voice low but firm. The children obeyed instantly, crouching beside Rose on the mattress. The bandits approached cautiously, one raising a hand to signal. They meant no immediate violence. The scar-lipped leader stepped forward, his eyes cold and calculating. "We told you yesterday," he said, voice sharp. "The debt stands. That woman owes us, and we'll collect." Elias's jaw tightened. "She owes nothing to men who prey on the weak." The bandit laughed, low and cruel. "Weak? She's alone. And you're just another fool trying to play hero." Clara's small voice rose, trembling but defiant. "Leave us alone. You can't touch us." The leader's sneer deepened. "Little girl, know your place." Elias's eyes flicked to each of the children. Micah's grip on the broken chair leg tightened. Jonah wriggled against Rose, uncomprehending but frightened. Elias swallowed the sting of memories long buried, the faces of his own lost family, and pushed it down, replacing it with single, sharp resolve. He stepped forward, revolver raised, body tense, ready for whatever came next. Dust swirled around the shack, morning light catching the glint of steel. The wind seemed to hold its breath. Elias whispered to himself, almost inaudible, "I won't let them take this family, not like before." The first bandit tested him with a flick of the rifle, nudging it toward the doorframe. The sound echoed through the tiny shack, like a drumbeat of imminent danger. Clara and Micah flinched, but Elias did not hesitate. The tension hung heavy, a knife edge between violence and survival, as dawn stretched across the prairie. Outside, the horses pawed the dirt. Inside, the children's breaths caught in unison. Elias's eyes never left the bandits. Every muscle coiled, every thought focused on one thing, keeping them safe, no matter the cost. By mid-morning, the bandits had retreated into the pale dust of the prairie, but Elias knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Rose's fever had worsened, her body trembling beneath the thin blanket, and her breaths came in shallow, rattling bursts. "We can't stay," Elias said, voice low. "It's not safe. We need a doctor, or at least a place where she can rest without fear." Clara's small hand clutched his coat sleeve. "Where will we go?" she asked, eyes wide, reflecting both hope and terror. Micah held Jonah close, his young face drawn and grim. "I don't know," Elias admitted, "but I promise I'll get you somewhere safe." He helped Rose to her feet, lifting her gently onto his horse while Micah guided Jonah beside him. Clara walked in step with Elias, the tin pot of stew balanced carefully in her arms. The world outside the shack seemed simultaneously alive and hostile. The wind carried the faint smell of smoke from the bandits' camp, and every rustle in the tall grass made Micah stiffen, as if ready to fight. They followed a narrow, worn trail into the hills beyond Duster Creek, the sun climbing higher, burning through mist and revealing jagged rocks and scrubland. The horses' hooves beat a rhythm into dry earth, but with every step, the children's exhaustion was evident. Rose leaned against Elias, shivering despite the weight of his coat over her shoulders. Jonah whimpered softly, sensing his mother's weakness. After an hour, the path brought them to a shallow river cutting through the canyon. The water swirled swiftly, fed by the snowmelt from distant peaks. Elias dismounted, testing the river's edge with his boot. The current looked treacherous. "Can you make it across?" Micah asked, eyes wide. Clara held on to Elias's arm, clutching the pot tightly. Jonah wriggled against his mother. Elias studied the river, calculating. "We'll go slow. Stick close." He led the way, stepping carefully into the icy water. Clara followed his instructions, stepping where he indicated, gripping his hand tightly. Micah carried Jonah on his back, moving with care. The river's chill cut through their clothes, numbing fingers and toes. For a moment, the current caught Micah's footing. Jonah cried out. Clara reached for him instinctively, losing her balance. Elias lunged, catching both children, splashing in the icy water. Heart pounding, muscles burning, he steadied them, forcing them to the opposite bank. He hauled Rose's horse out as well, ensuring she was safe. Every step felt like a battle against the current, but at last they emerged on the far side, drenched, exhausted, but alive. The children collapsed on the rocky ground, shivering and gasping, while Elias checked Rose's pulse. Her skin was hot to the touch, fever unrelenting, but she breathed steadily. The river had not broken them, though the ordeal had left them rattled. Elias allowed himself a brief glance at the horizon, where the plains stretched endlessly. Danger was still out there, bandits, isolation, the unforgiving wilderness, but he had kept them alive for now. He swallowed the lump in his throat and muttered, "We're not done yet, but we'll make it." Clara lifted the tin pot, trying to shield it from the mud. "We saved it all day," she whispered, half laughing despite the cold. Elias gave her a small, grim smile. There was warmth in her defiance, a spark that reminded him why he had stayed. The group pressed onward, the canyon walls closing around them, offering both shelter and a constant sense of entrapment. Every step was measured, every movement careful. Elias's revolver hung at his side, ready, eyes scanning the shadows, mind alert to every sound. The children followed, trusting him completely, unaware that this journey would test not just their bodies, but the fragile threads of hope they clung to. By late afternoon, the small party reached the edge of Duster Creek again, weary from the river crossing and the unrelenting journey through the canyon. Elias guided Rose to the town's doctor, a thin, unkempt man in his 50s, with a stained coat and a flask perpetually dangling from his belt. The man squinted at Rose and shook his head. "This woman needs care," Elias said urgently. "Her fever is dangerous." The doctor sniffed, eyes glinting with greed. "Care costs money. You got the coin?" "We don't have enough," Elias said, jaw tightening. "I'll pay whatever I can, but she can't wait." The doctor's lips curled into a smirk. "Then she waits. No coin, no care. That's the law of this town." Elias felt a rage-long buried rise like wildfire. Memories of helplessness and loss clanged together. His own family gone, the fire he could not fight, the faces of the children he'd failed to protect. He grabbed the doctor by the collar, slamming him against the wall. Glasses rattled. Dust fell. The doctor yelped and begged for release. Rose reached out weakly, placing a hand on Elias's arm. "Let it be, let him be." Her voice was fragile but firm, and Elias let go, breathing hard. He turned away, carrying the weight of failure and frustration as he escorted the children back into the town streets. The narrow alleys were quiet for only a moment before the sound of hooves struck the dirt with deliberate menace. 3 bandits, the same faces from the shack, raced into town, eyes scanning, rifles ready. Clara's small hand clutched the tin pot of stew. Micah pressed Jonah closer, heart hammering. Elias pushing behind a stack of crates, revolver in hand, muscles coiled. The bandits dismounted, their shadows long in the fading light, their faces twisted with cruelty. "You thought you could hide," one of them spat, voice low and dangerous. "The debt isn't gone. We'll take what's ours." Elias's mind raced. He had fought alone before, lost more than he could bear, and yet this time he wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for them. Every memory of failure sharpened his focus. Short, precise motions. He dropped behind the crates, fired once, dust exploding where the bullet hit the wall beside a bandit's head. Another lunged forward. Elias spun, shot grazing his shoulder. Pain burned, but he ignored it. The children yelped, ducking closer. Jonah whimpered. The street became chaos. Men shouted. Horses stampeded. Elias moved with a mixture of fury and protection, dragging the children through alleys, around corners, always keeping the bandits at bay. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. Then came the quiet terror, the bandit leader appearing ahead, rifle aimed at Clara. Time slowed, heartbeats loud, wind whipping through the street. Elias stepped in front, ready to take the shot for the girl, for Jonah, for the little family clinging to life beside him. "Not today," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. His finger tightened on the trigger. His world narrowed to a single purpose: survival, protection, and the promise he had made to get them home alive. Dust, sweat, and gunpowder mingled in the heavy air as Elias backed the children into a temporary safe corner, keeping watch on the threat and calculating his next move. He knew the bandits would not give up easily, and neither would he. In that moment, Elias understood something he hadn't in years. Survival was not enough. To protect these children, he had to face the darkness he had long buried, confront it, and rise. Not just for them, but for the man he still hoped to be. The sun had dipped low behind the distant hills, painting Duster Creek in muted shades of amber and dust. The town square lay quiet, but the air buzzed with tension, like the static before a lightning strike. Elias Ward, 36, stood at the edge of the wooden boardwalk, revolver in hand, eyes scanning the street. Every creak of wood beneath his boots and every faint whistle of wind through the narrow alleys felt like a drumbeat signaling the approaching storm. Rose, 32, leaned against a crate, fragile but determined, the fever still lingering in her burning skin. Clara, 7, clutched the dented tin pot like a talisman, while Micah, 10, held Jonah, 1, close to his chest. The children's eyes were wide, reflecting both fear and trust in Elias, the man who had become their shield, their guardian in this unforgiving world. The bandits emerged from the shadows, 3 grim figures astride horses, dust kicking up in their wake. The scarred leader dismounted first, boots scraping against the boardwalk, rifle resting casually against his shoulder. His eyes swept over the small group, lingering on the children with cruel calculation. "You thought running would save you?" he called, voice carrying across the square. "This ends now." Elias didn't flinch. His hand tightened on the revolver. "It ends when you leave," he said, voice low but unwavering. "Not before." The bandits laughed, a harsh sound that grated against the town stillness. One of them drew a knife, spinning it casually between his fingers. The leader's eyes glimmered with menace. "You can't protect them forever. You've got no reinforcements, no plan, no chance." Elias's mind raced. He thought of the long months of solitude, the ghosts of his own failures, the faces of Clara, Micah, and little Jonah. For the first time since he had lost everything in the fire, he felt the edge of hope sharpen into resolve. Not for himself, not for pride, but for them. He would not allow their innocence to be stolen by cruel men. The first bandit stepped forward, knife glinting in the fading light. Elias fired, a quick, precise shot that sent him sprawling into the dirt. Dust rose as horse hooves stamped angrily. The other 2 bandits drew pistols and fired, the shots echoing off the wooden facades of the empty stores. Elias dug behind a crate, bullets cutting the air overhead. Clara whimpered, huddled behind Rose, who instinctively shielded Jonah with her frail body. Micah gritted his teeth, clutching his younger brother, eyes wide with terror yet burning with determination. Elias popped up, firing twice more, forcing the bandits back a few paces. His movements were deliberate, controlled, honed by years of surviving alone on the frontier. But each time he glanced at the children, his heart skipped. Not from fear, but from the sheer weight of responsibility. Every life in that square was tethered to his choices, and failure was not an option. The leader barked orders, and the bandits began circling, attempting to flank him. Dust and gunpowder filled the air. Elias moved with the precision of a seasoned fighter, using crates, barrels, and the low wagon scattered in the square as cover. His every step was calculated, every shot measured. Clara gasped as a bullet splintered would near her head. Rose pressed Jonah tighter, whispering reassurances, though her voice trembled with both fear and admiration for Elias. The leader, frustrated, raised his rifle and aimed directly at Elias. Time seemed to slow. Heartbeats echoed. Elias locked eyes with the bandit, then glanced at the children. He knew what he had to do. He fired, a single shot that found its mark. The leader staggered, clutching his shoulder, his weapon dropping with a metallic clang. The remaining bandits hesitated, uncertainty flashing across their faces. Elias rose slowly, revolver steady, gaze unyielding. "Leave now," he said, "and don't ever come back." The bandits exchanged quick, desperate glances. They were beaten, not by numbers, but by the fierce, unrelenting protection of a man who had nothing left to lose, except the lives of children he had taken under his care. Muttering curses, they mounted their horses and vanished into the approaching night, leaving dust and silence in their wake. Elias lowered his weapon, chest heaving. He turned to the children. Clara's wide eyes met his, filled with awe and gratitude. Micah exhaled shakily, brushing mud from Jonah's tiny coat. Rose leaned heavily against him, weak but smiling faintly. For the first time since he had met them, Elias allowed himself to feel something more than exhaustion, something like relief, and perhaps the stirrings of hope. But the frontier did not forgive easily, and the night was still young. Night had fallen over Duster Creek, painting the town in muted shades of blue and gray. The bandits had vanished, their threats carried away by the wind, leaving behind silence and the faint smell of gunpowder. Elias Ward, 36, led the small group down the back alleys, careful to avoid the town's main streets until they reached a modest cabin on the outskirts, a place he had prepared in case of emergencies. Rose, 32, seated herself on the rough mattress that smelled faintly of straw and smoke, still shivering from her lingering fever. Elias knelt beside her, administering the medicine he had purchased earlier, carefully measuring each dose with the precision of a man who had learned to survive by paying attention to the smallest details. Clara, 7, stood beside her mother, holding the dented tin pot tightly, as if it contained more than just food. Hope, perhaps, or the promise that they were safe. Micah, 10, placed Jonah, 1, onto a small blanket, wrapping the baby gently against his chest. The children were exhausted, their small faces smeared with dirt and streaked with tears, yet their trust in Elias remained unwavering. Elias exhaled, watching them. In that quiet cabin, he realized the depth of what had brought him here. Not just survival, not just protecting them from bandits, but the chance to rebuild a fragment of family in a world that had long since taken his own. "You'll rest now," Elias said softly, voice low but firm. "No one will hurt you here tonight." Rose looked up at him, eyes bright despite the weariness. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. You've given us more than protection. You've given hope." Clara stepped closer, small hand brushing against his sleeve. "Promise you'll stay with us?" she asked, voice trembling with earnestness. Jonah babbled softly, tugging at his mother's gown. Micah met Elias's eyes, a quiet plea for safety in his gaze. Elias's jaw tightened. He thought of the long years spent wandering the plains, alone and broken, haunted by the flames that had taken his family. He had buried that pain deep, believing it too heavy to carry. And yet here in the flickering firelight, he felt its surface, not as grief, but as a reminder why he fought, why he protected. "I'll stay," he said finally, "for tonight, and as long as you need me." His voice carried the weight of promise, tempered by resolve. Hours passed, the fever slowly receding from Rose's body under Elias's careful watch. The children drifted asleep, exhausted from fear and relief, curled around their mother and each other. Elias remained vigilant, scanning the darkness outside the small cabin, revolver at his side. Each shadow reminded him of the frontier's dangers, yet none could penetrate the fragile sanctuary he had created. As the night deepened, Elias allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought of the men he had fought, the dangers faced, the sacrifices made. Yet through it all, one truth had become clear. The frontier was not just a land of hardship, but a place where courage, kindness, and determination could carve a sanctuary even in the harshest wilderness. He looked down at Clara and Micah, breathing softly in sleep, and then at Jonah nestled against Rose. A quiet strength settled in his chest, the kind that comes not from victory over others, but from the decision to protect, to endure, and to care when the world demanded cruelty. Elias whispered to himself, almost as a vow, "We survive, we endure, and we begin again." Outside, the wind rustled to the prairie grass, carried with it the distant sound of the world, wild, untamed, yet full of possibility. Inside, the cabin glowed softly in the firelight, a haven of warmth and safety. For the first time in years, Elias felt that perhaps he had finally found something worth fighting for, something that anchored him to the present and gave him reason to hope. And in the quiet, the little family slept, unaware of the full extent of the danger they had escaped, but feeling the warmth of protection, the certainty of care, and the comfort of being alive. Elias leaned back against the wall, revolver resting across his knees, eyes scanning the shadows one last time. He allowed himself a small, rare smile. The frontier had tested him, as it tested all who lived by its rules, But he had faced it. And for these children, Clara, Micah, and little Jonah, and their mother Rose, he had triumphed. Not with wealth, not with fame, but with courage, heart, and unwavering determination. And as dawn crept slowly over the hills, painting the prairie gold, Elias understood that survival alone was not enough. It was a choice to protect, to endure, and to act with kindness and courage that defined a man. And for this small family, Elias Ward was more than a protector. He was a hope they had clung to and a hero they would never forget.